Hello, my friend. How are you? I hope you're having an outstanding day. This is Heather. This is the Back to Me podcast. This is super amazing because I have Dr. Jean Marie Farish with me today. Love, light. I just feel like that's enough. That describes you perfectly. Love, light. The Voice of America Empowerment Show. So, is your show called Love, Light? How does that
Yes,
work?
it's Love Light. It's a World Talk Radio empowerment show. We air every Friday live, and shows are on demand. And I'm going into my fourth year, so I have guests from all over the world who join us on empowering topics. So we invite your listeners to tune in.
Absolutely. I love sharing new things for people to access to help them. And so you've been doing this for 4 years, and
We're
I
going
find it
into 4 years.
fascinating going into 4 years. So I was reading some of what you've done, and you've done so much. Like you've like books, and you've formed centers, and you're working on all kinds of things. So what initially got you into this realm of this what brought you into this realm of love and light and helping so many people?
Thank you so much, Heather, for asking that question. And I must say, I'm delighted to be on your podcast today. I spent a 28-year career in higher education. I was a department chair and professor of a counseling department. And of course, all of my writing and work was more so academic. But
Oh,
but actually, I always was a truth seeker, and after reaching certain milestones, I just still felt like something was missing. I had a longing for something. As an educator and teaching students, I asked myself a series of questions. Who am I? Why am I here? I was a truth seeker. And I had this tick list of all the things that I wanted to do in my life, and I had checked off most of them, and I was still like unfulfilled. And um, it kind of led me on this journey of seeking truth, more about myself, more about love, more about this connectedness. I felt like a disconnect with my true self after reaching those milestones and those societal, familial, cultural expectations that we fulfill. And I had an opportunity after reaching a dark night of the soul to be invited to Malaysia to work at a university there. And it was there where I went into peace and love, and I found myself, and all the encounters that I experienced with priests and working and volunteering at the university, traveling in throughout Southeast Asia. And at the end of my journey, I asked myself a question. I got an epiphany that the journey was all about love. And so
right.
there began my journey into, you know, more about, what love really is and what I was missing. But that was the beginning of my search.
That's that compresses a lot of stuff into one little nugget of information. But something that came to me, you were talking about all these milestones, all these boxes that we check. Who am I? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? I find all of the boxes that we're trying to check are external to us.
Yes.
And that's where we
Yes.
feel like we get, if you are lucky enough to check all of these boxes that you think you're supposed to check, and you still feel that almost like empty or dissatisfied, or something's not right. It's you haven't checked your internal compass, right?
Yes. Yes.
And found that what is what is actually my internal milestone that I'm looking at. And do you find that a lot of people, they come to that realization that it's something inside them, and it's often somehow connected with love, however you would define it?
That's a wonderful insight that you share, because I think people are longing, for something more. And I call it, after I left Malaysia, I wrote my first book, The Long Journey Home, because I felt like I had started the journey back to myself. And I
Right.
think we become disconnected from our true self. And as you so eloquently stated, we're so busy looking at these outside forces to find the love or feel worthy or good enough. And it doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. And amazingly enough, if you're lucky on your spiritual journey, you'll become more consciously aware. And sometimes it can take you to that dark night of the soul where you have really just drained yourself and you feel, this sense of unfulfillment or whatever. And it kind of brings you back to this journey to yourself that we are longing to connect to.
And I don't think people should be afraid, like the way we describe it is, that dark night of the soul. I think people are afraid of it because they don't want to know
Yes.
what's down
Yes.
there. And, it might not be pleasant, but there's another side. Like there's an after. I'm just reminded of a friend that I had, this was many years ago, who was, I called him a serial dater because he was never single. And I said, "Why don't you just like
Yeah.
hang out with yourself?" He said he didn't like himself. So that was, and I wasn't on this journey at that time. Or I guess I was just in the beginnings of it. I didn't know I was on this journey at that time. And at the time, I thought, oh my gosh, how terrible that you wouldn't want to spend time with yourself. And who else is going to be around all the time but you,
But Heather,
right?
let's face it, to be alone with yourself, I mean, we're always talking to ourselves. And,
True.
I try to show people how to treat themselves well with more respect and love because the things that we tell ourselves, you wouldn't tell to your worst enemy. So
No,
so the point is, how to be alone with yourself, the opportunity for self-reflection, self-introspection, to be your own best friend, to befriend yourself, and to love your own company because to sit and face yourself, a lot of people can't stand that and they get distracted with people, dating, outside things. And of course,
smartphones.
yes, smartphones, anything that's a distraction. But when all is said and done, you have to come home to yourself. I mean, late at night when, the distractions cease or whatever, I think you have to come to terms with that at some point and face yourself.
Well, it's funny because that's how the name of this podcast came about back to me because
Yes.
I was in the hospital and no one could visit me because of COVID at the time. And because of what was going on, I couldn't escape into my phone or anything. So I was there with myself. Might
Yes.
as well just sit and have a chat with myself about where I'm going and what I'm doing and what's next, It's
Yes.
like,
Yes.
but I wouldn't wish that on people to have their experience it that way, but the universe decided that I was okay with that method of communication. She's ready. We'll just stick her in the hospital for a few days. But when you were in Malaysia, um, this such an issue. That's one of the places I haven't been yet.
Ah,
And what kind of experiences helped gel that for you in Malaysia? I'm just super curious on what it was.
Malaysia is like my home. In
Ah,
fact, I really had a past life there because I felt so familiar with the land, the people, and I felt at home.
wow.
I really I felt totally at home, and there were people there who it's like we had this connection. And every time I went to an event or it was all about love. It's like this message of love kept circulating over and over and over. And I had the opportunity to spend and have time to spend with priests to learn more about life and myself. And, I had teamwork with the staff there. We traveled to indigenous communities. It was a very loving culture, multicultural with Indian, Malay, just all kinds of people there. But it was a very loving environment, very tropical, beautiful, and I found so much peace there. And it's like Spirit gifted me with that opportunity to go there. Just like you said, you were in the hospital. It's
Yeah.
like Spirit said, okay, I'm going to give you this opportunity to to spend 6 months there. And so I was immersed in love and, the festivities, the lectures, the interactions with the faculty, just it was just and the priests, like I said, all of the encounters really shaped my life. And I had the quiet time to really spend and get to know myself in an environment that was fully beautiful and loving.
And it is sometimes you have to go. So we're in North America, which is, where we live and grew up. But I have found in the places that I travel that other cultures view that personal connection
Yes.
so much more, well, differently than North Americans, and so much more important. Like, it's not that we don't find friendships important, but it's there's a different flavor to it. And I found when I was in India, when we were in Vietnam, even like I was just in Egypt, it's just a different um, sensation almost that comes from it. So Malaysia must be very similar to that.
Yes, and I'm glad that you brought up the point about the relationship aspect. And of course, me spending a career in academia, it's like the first thing we looked at was, do they meet the educational requirements to be the faculty? And of
Right.
course, in when I was in Malaysia, and I was there several times before they invited me to come there for 6 months to help them write a book, they I realized that relationships came before your intellect. You had
Right.
to have the relationship aspect established. And after I was there several times, they invited me back to stay for 6 months. And of course, like you traveling to India and other places, I find that simplicity the
Yes.
simplicity and the peace. I mean, you can imagine in Malaysia, I had to live simplistically. I didn't drive. I walked. I walked to work every day, to see the beauty. And it was like, gosh, this is so simple and refreshing. So it was refreshing. But
It,
relationships came first.
relationships come first, and it's interesting that they had to check you out that many times. Well, let's just see. Will she fit in? And it is true that people will think, oh, it's third world countries. It has less conveniences, but I don't know that conveniences have created that much, as you were saying, it hasn't made our lives simpler. Having conveniences has made it more complicated, and I feel like more separation.
This is so true, this separation aspect. And even in Malaysia, we have to understand that they there's still the elements of the ancient culture there, but it's still very aesthetic and, I mean, high level living or whatever. So it's a combination of everything because, I visited the indigenous communities, and of course, then some of the more, it's what can I say? Uh, uh, Beautiful and places to live and stay or whatever. So it's a combination of everything, but you experience the fullness. But
Right.
but within the midst of that, it's like there's no egoic kind of aspect of it. Here we are here, but we're still the same people. Here we are in the indigenous community. We're still the same people. And the projects that I participated in were the University of Science Malaysia, worked with the business industry and the community to bring forth services throughout Southeast Asia.
Oh,
So it was a different mission of service, and I
right.
to see the university and the, community doing such good service, I was just privileged to be a part of that.
So did your wholehearted loving, you can see that was the seed specifically in Malaysia that planted that?
it was the seed because, as I indicated at the end of my journey, I was at an event, a Chinese festival sponsored by the students. They were at doing charity work at a home for the elders, and that was, I think I had a couple of days to go. That was the last event because I was the writer. I helped them write a book,
Oh,
and
nice.
I was at this event, and all of a sudden I got quiet within myself, and it's like tears came to my eyes,
Mm.
and I asked my spirit, "What is the real purpose of this journey?" And it's like spirit whispered in my ear, "It was all about love. It was all about love," just like that. And I was like, "Oh my God." So that was the seed that was planted because it was there that I learned really the meaning of love and how to love myself and in an environment where people loved and cared for each other. That was the seed.
And then how do you bring that back? So having that kind of experience is so amazing where you finally go, "Oh my gosh, I get it. Now what do I do with it?"
It's like what you said about being in the hospital and even your journeys. Spirit used me for the purpose. Now, if you had have, told me years ago that I'd be on a radio show, love light and writing books about love and, going on other journeys, I'd say, "Are you nuts?" Because I was in academia and I had
Right,
spent my career there and I had no thought about, you know, leaving that, but the time came for me to leave and I voluntarily transitioned or retired from higher education because I really didn't fit anymore there. When after that experience in Malaysia, it's like, okay, spirit, like, okay, it's time for you to go. So I created my nonprofit organization. I developed programs for the children's hospital.
right. That
Yeah,
was
I
other
just,
stuff I wanted you to talk about, like all
yeah,
these programs you were
yeah,
creating.
yeah, and spirit, it was, and I don't, I pay homage to spirit for the guidance and for those who helped with the project because we had a cultural arts festival in the hospital for the
Wow,
children, family, caregivers, staff. We had people that came in and did magic shows, told stories, did artwork. We brought the community to the hospital. And that's what I did after I transitioned from higher education. I spent 2 years doing that after getting a grant funded, partially funded by the Mississippi Arts Commission, and
wow,
I enjoyed that.
right? And it's too bad, like, I was thinking about it, it's too bad that 'cause, I feel like education is a place where you can access adding like, giving that to people as a way of thinking, but if I guess if it's not ready for it, it's not ready for it, and you gotta find your way to share it.
May I share something with you?
Absolutely.
When I returned from Malaysia, I was really a different person. I was healthier, happier. When I went there, I was a little bit, but I was healthier, I was happier, I was more at peace within myself. It was kind of difficult for me to get back into the same environment.
Right,
And I thought about I asked my dean, who was the dean then, I said, "Look, why don't we sponsor a project for the community? I have some great ideas." And I created a project, Pep for Angels, or Life Care Wellness Pep for Angels, to bring in the community, do a lot of projects. I was trying to model the university projects from Malaysia.
right.
And I was told, we don't want that. I set up one event and maybe a couple of people came.
Wow.
And so that was my time to say, okay, you're trying to do something that then, and there's no disrespect for that. I'm just voicing you what I wanted to do after getting back from a place where I experienced that camaraderie, service, leadership. And one thing Dr. Prof. Dado Seishing May, she was the vice chancellor then. She was the one who invited me there. And she said, a university that sits in the community and doesn't do anything for for the community shouldn't exist. And they were very adamant about that. And I was like,
Right?
oh my God, you know?
Yeah. Because mostly universities are just themselves. They're just like, we're just here to train future workers, and I don't know of any universities really that are involved like that in community projects.
Well, I mean, we spent weekends going to community centers where had set up medical facilities for the people, and the people were caring for the facility. And Prof. Dado Seishing May will go there and do workshops on stress management. And it was like people could gather there, the children, the families, and I was like, gosh, this is interesting. But aside from that, that was in Penang, but there were so many projects in Vietnam and all across Southeast Asia because they connected with, like I say, businesses and other universities and the
Right.
community to serve. So I came back with this enlightened mission of service. But
So does your Center for Conscious Living, is that now taking that role on for
actually,
projects?
what I'm doing, the sponsoring of projects like the children's project for the hospital, and I had the nonprofit organization Life Care Wellness PEP for Angels. That was my first organization that was specifically focused on enriching the community with an emphasis on children hospitalized. So that was
What's it
my
called?
Life Care Wellness PEP for Angels.
PEP for Angels.
That was a nonprofit organization that I created after I transitioned from the university with a focus on children hospitalized. So that was my first mission. So the Center for Conscious Living kind of came later, but
Right.
I was, yeah, yeah.
But I mean, think about, like, I know we have here specific children's hospitals where the children are all together, and um, not everywhere, but they try to have places for the families to stay. And because you don't want to be away from your kid when they're
True.
sick and in the hospital, but they need support too. you know, it's like having something that can support everyone in that whole situation.
And
Right.
the project was sponsored through the University of Mississippi Medical Center. And of
Right.
course, they have places where the family members could go. And I must share with you that I did volunteer at the hospital. I was a volunteer at the hospital. I would greet after I retired, and uh, I would greet families and I would serve coffee. And that was kind of the first step before I progressed toward, getting the grant.
And do you think that you would have come to this place of being able to help so many people if you hadn't gone to your personal, self-love area place?
I would not have, because you have to learn to love yourself and care for yourself first. That's what was focused on in Malaysia. It's almost like they knew something about me. And it was all about self-love, self-care. I was helping them write a book, and I was so intensely involved. And sometimes they say, okay, Prof, it's time to take a break. Let's go such and such. And we go laugh and eat and, just have fun. But the point is, you have to get in touch with yourself, that long journey home back to yourself, as you have on your podcast, so rightfully so named, Back to Me. I had to come back to myself, but it was a gradual process because when I left Malaysia, it took me a while to kind of process what happened to you, but I journaled every day. And then when I got home, I wrote the book, The Long Journey Home, to capture what I went through. And I realized it's like this, I didn't process this all of a sudden. I had to gradually
Right.
understand what happened.
And how, because I know that some people, when I tell them the name of my podcast, they think it's a selfish thing,
No.
because in popular vernacular, there was that little back to me, back to me. But being able to have people feel comfortable with the idea that taking care of yourself actually is the least selfish thing you can do.
Very well said. Very well said.
And what are your thoughts on it? I mean,
Oh,
because now that you've gone through that and you've written books, like I haven't written a book. I've give you big marks for getting out there and spreading the word.
I would say that spirit has used me to do that. Just like you were talking about your journey. My
Mhm.
journey took me to a whole different point. Like I indicated earlier, if you had told me I would leave higher education, I would have told you you're nuts. But spirit, I was inspired to do so. And I think the journey to self-love, self-care, people think that it's selfish. From
They
my
do.
books that I've written, I've taught classes at Millsaps Enrichment Program. It's a Millsaps College enrichment program. So I teach this class on a love class. And, and it's interesting because I teach this model of love to the students. And when I taught the model of love to them, and I said, these are things that you have to practice, these are the ingredients of love. And when they would practice them, they would have aha moments. And a lot of them would say, well, I love my children, I love my husband, I love my family. I said, but what about you? They said, I never thought about myself. It
Oh
was like an
my.
aha moment for a lot of them. And they said, gosh, I feel so much better. And they say, my family is saying, what has happened? What are you doing? We like what's happening. We like, and I said, educate them. Create the ripple for positive change. I said, educate them. Tell them what you're doing. But that's an example, Heather, of the aha
Right?
moment of I don't, I love everyone, but you can't fully love others if you don't fully love and care for yourself. It's just
What
something
kinds of
about
things
that.
did you have them practice? I'm just
What
curious.
Thank you for asking that question because I adopted Henry Drummond's uh, uh, spectrum of love. Henry Drummond is an 18th century noble Scottishman.
Oh,
He was a counselor, teacher, evangelist, world traveler. He analyzed love. And when I did my early research, I was like, okay, let me really do some when I was
that's
writing
very
the book.
academic of you to go and
Yes,
research
yes,
love.
I had to research it. I mean, it's embedded in me. So I had to research it. Here I am researching love, 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 love. And of course, everything I found, Heather, was about romantic love.
Yeah,
And so Henry Drummond, I got a collection of his books. And when I got back from Malaysia, a spiritual friend of mine said, you need this book on Drummond. After sharing what you've experienced, you need this book. And so in this book, you know, Drummond really talked about love and the spectrum of love. So, to make a long story short, I adopt this as the holistic model of love. There are nine ingredients that I call the recipe of love. And
oh,
they're gifts of love, and they're really divine love. And if you'd like for me to share those nine ingredients, I will be happy to do so.
I would
And you
love
can
that.
and you can see why the students had those aha moments because we look at love, Heather, as casual sentiments of expressions of emotions.
Yeah,
I love you until you do something I don't like. and
exactly.
and love is more transactional in everyday life, right?
Oh, that's a great way to describe it.
And not only that, but we have this thought about, like I did, that I had to overgive and please in order for you to be deserving of your love, which catapulted me into the dark night.
Right.
But love is our divine birthright, and it comes from within, and we don't have to seek worthiness outside of ourselves. And that's one of the most empowering lessons that I teach from. But we have to really learn what is love. What does that look like? What does that feel like without just going around saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. And then, after a while, if you don't get the love in return, what happens? You feel resentful, right?
Right.
I did this for you and you're not doing this for me. But taking care of ourselves, it teaches us how to love and respect ourselves. And so let me share those 9 ingredients in the
That'd be amazing.
recipe of love.
Yes.
The first one is, and of course, let me just share with you that, as Drummond indicated, they're all like colors of the rainbow. They all have to be practiced, not one left out, which takes a lot of work, a lot of practice, and a lot of awareness in our daily lives. The first one is patience.
Mm.
Patience. To be patient with yourself, to be calm, not rushed, not in a hurry, to take time to pause, reflect, and make heartfelt decisions. So many times we're rushing around, we're not listening to our heart, we're not looking for that intuitive guidance. And I know for myself, I made a lot of decisions that and choices that were not in my best interest, but needless to say, they brought me where I am. So
Yep.
patience. So we have to practice patience, kindness, kindness. To be kind, treat yourself with compassion and loving kindness, to be considerate and thoughtful and compassionate about yourself. How you treat yourself, Heather, teach others how to treat you. And
Yep.
also, it can be a model for others. Wow. As the students in my class indicated, as I began to practice these, they saw that there were certain things that I stopped doing because it wasn't kind for myself. And ultimately, it had a drawback for others as well. So loving kindness. Uh, the next one, generosity. Generosity. Giving from a place of love is loving yourself first. And to be generous with the spirit of gratitude creates a powerful cycle of manifestation. What you give, you receive. So feelings of joy from acts of generosity are reciprocal. So be generous with our time, attention, and resources because it multiplies goodness and we pay it forward. But we have to learn to give from a place of generosity and love from ourselves first, because sometimes we
Right.
give without, from a what, half empty cup.
Yes.
So
Or
it's
you
all
give with an expectation of
yes,
keeping
yes,
score.
certainly, certainly. The next one is humility. And that's to be humble, not puffed up, have this egoic way of being, living, this self importance where we don't acknowledge our limitations, and vulnerabilities. We are not growing. We're not open to listening. We're not open to listening to that divine guidance because we think we know it all. So when we are humble, we transform self righteousness into healthy self reverence.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's so important. The next one is courtesy. To
Mm.
be polite, to be polite to ourselves. How often are we trying to be polite to others? And we're not polite to ourselves. So, by being polite to ourselves and courteous to ourselves, we affirm our own worth and value and dignity of ourselves as well. So, you know, as we look at the expressions of being courteous, may I help you, please, thank you, excuse me, forgive me, these heartfelt expressions of love, let's turn that inward and be polite to ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
And then good temper, that's another ingredient in this recipe of love. To not be provoked, ill-tempered, reactive, jealous, angry, envious, to remain well disposed, gracious, and non-reactive to chaos. How many times do we don't preserve our inner peace and get all intertwined with uh, these thoughts that we have, and uh, uh, how we treat ourselves, thinking evil about ourselves. You remember what
Right.
I said earlier? We're always talking to ourselves, and
Yeah.
sometimes the things we're telling ourselves are not really good. And then, of course, sincerity. Uh, that is really, being to accept what is real and true and to be honest and trustworthy. That's so important because it fosters trust in ourselves and in our relationship with others. And the last ingredient of love is guilelessness, and
Hmm.
that's really it's kind of an old-fashioned term, but it's really about not doing good and not thinking evil, you know, not
Right.
wishing evil for ourselves and evil for others or bad thoughts for others. So those are the 9 ingredients in the recipe of love. And it's really about conscious loving. And it takes a lot to be aware of these and to practice them in your daily life. I know for me, I have to call myself out when I'm not being patient. I'm like,
Right.
okay, you're not being patient, shift. And amazingly enough, I remember I was on a call with someone helping me with my website. And at first I had this anxious thought, and then I was like, okay, get calm, get patient. And the person who was helping me, they said, "Oh, you're so patient." And I was like, "My goodness, they called it out."
That's one place where you can definitely need to practice those things with your websites.
Yes, yes, but in our daily lives, you know?
Right? But I was
So
thinking, like, that list, like, it sounds for some people, it might sound onerous, so many things. But I think it's like anything that you're learning. In the beginning, you're stumble and you're like, "Oh, I forgot this one or I forgot that one." But after time, they just it becomes ingrained that
yes,
yes, doesn't mean you're not, it doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. Everyone here knows I don't believe in perfection, but you will catch yourself sooner
yes,
when you are stepping out of
yes,
that alignment. So you
yes,
say, "Oh, I can
yes.
hear that." With me, it's when I hear a tone of voice come out of me, I'm like, "Oh, I don't like that tone of voice.
Yes.
That's not who I want to be talking right now."
Exactly, perfectly
Yeah,
said, because, Heather, love is our natural state of being. It's like the book I wrote, Living in the Spirit of Love, our natural state of being, but we've forgotten that.
right,
We all these faulty beliefs out, uh, family, cultural, societal, institutional, we get further and further away from
let
who we
all those
truly
things
are.
outside you push you off,
Yes.
right?
So we're returning to this helps us return to our natural state. And what I found based on my practice is that I'm more alert and aware, and I know, okay, you're thinking you're not in good temper. So it's becoming more and more natural to me where I can call it out
Right,
and then shift, or ask myself some questions. What is it that you're going through now that you can't treat yourself with kindness?
right,
And I have to reflect and say, okay, this happened, that happened, to honor my feelings, right?
right.
And
Or, I mean, I've been in the situation where there was I was not in a good space and, I couldn't get out of it, so I just removed myself from from other people so they didn't get injured.
that's the safe thing to do.
Yeah, I'll just remove myself while I sort this out.
Or before I say something, like for me, I don't want to say something that I'm going to regret, right? And I've learned how
Right?
to, know when to be silent or
Yeah,
when to
yeah,
just
exactly.
go inward and say, okay, what's happening? How did that person trigger that in you?
Right?
And like you said,
Those
healthily remove myself
Yeah, exactly.
to give
Those
myself
are
a time
so
out.
powerful. Those so even those when was Henry Drummond? 1800s?
18th century, yes, he and Henry Drummond lived in love. He was exemplary in his practice. And they called him the Prince of Peace.
Wow.
And I have a collection of all of his books. I love reading about him because he will show not only just writing about it, but he lived it. He
Right.
lived it, and it's just
And we might
amazing.
think that's like old fashioned, but I think that that's not something that ever ages like that. It's something that's we need to reestablish and bring back out as it's not an old practice. It's an eternal practice,
Yes. Yes,
right?
divine love, showing us the way. Henry Drummond had a beautiful quote, and I use this a lot in my work since I adopt his work, and I acknowledge that I adopt his work. He said, "You will find when you look upon your life, the moments when you really lived are the moments when you've done things in the spirit of love."
Oh, that's good. Excellent. It's so funny because I was going to say, do you have any final words of wisdom? But you're dropping so many bombs here.
I get excited. I get excited about this topic. And as you say in your podcast, back to me, because every moment is a journey
Yeah,
back to me so that I can be better, live in the spirit of love, radiate that out, know when I'm off track, and continue to be better. I have not reached the mountaintop by any means. I'm striving and practicing moment by moment.
that's amazing. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that I had a chance to talk with you. That you came and you shared all of this recipe. I'm going to put the recipe in the show notes, friends, so you can find it. I'm going to put all the links to find your books, all of your awesome, and definitely your show airs on Fridays.
Yes, every Friday, live and on demand, and all of the shows are on the banner page for Love Light Voice America. If you even put my name in, Voice America Love Light, it'll pop up. And all the shows are listed categorically by the years, by the topics, and you can tune in and listen anytime you want at your convenience or live. And after we broadcast live, the show goes on demand. And I have guests from
Amazing.
all over the world. I'm going to have you on my show.
Of
and
course.
uh, and we have listeners who tune in all around the world to our
Amazing.
show. So I
It's
am
such an important it's so important, I think, that to have all of that out there for people to access. So I think, friends, you gotta get over there and have a listen to all this love going on in the world. We'll have a big old love in.
yes, 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 yes.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I enjoyed our conversation immensely.
And thank you so much, Heather. It is just a delight to be here on your show and to connect with your listeners. And thank you for all of the beautiful and wonderful work that you're doing to make the world better. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I'm
Thank
grateful and
you.
honored.
Thank you.
Mhm.
My friends, check the show notes, share it with someone who needs some love, and we'll